Welcome back to this year's Halloween Spooktacular. I'm going to be talking about another new release today, and that is Black Phone 2, the sequel to 2021's The Black Phone. Before we get started, just please let me know if this studio light has too much exposure on it. That way I can fix it for upcoming videos when I use my studio lights. It's just in a different position, so I can position it differently. 4 years after escaping the grabber, Finney Blake is struggling with his life after captivity. When his sister Gwen begins receiving calls in her dreams from the Black Phone and seeing disturbing visions of three boys being stalked at a winter camp, the siblings become determined to solve the mystery and confront a killer who has grown more powerful in death and more significant to them than either could imagine. I really enjoyed that first Black Phone movie. It was a really grounded, serial killer-esque movie that also added this element of supernatural to it that did feel a bit tacked on, but at the same time made it feel a bit unique. So I was really interested to see what Scott Derrickson would bring for a Black Phone 2 movie, and I did enjoy this. I really did. And there's parts of this movie that are much creepier, that are much more eerie than the original. I don't necessarily think it's better than the original, and as long as I don't forget later on, we will talk about whether or not this actually needed to exist. For me, though, this delivered what I actually thought it would. There's just a sense of uneasiness to it throughout this entire movie. Like, there's just this eerie, creepy vibe throughout the entire thing. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the dream sequences for Gwen are filmed on Super 8, so you have a lot of that grainy film stock. This makes those sequences scarier than they probably normally would be if they were filmed digitally, like most movies are today. And I thought the transitions between the Super 8 film and the natural looking digital film was pretty seamless. I liked how they were able to incorporate it and transition back and forth between the two of them. There's a lot more character development here. What I like so much about Black Phone 2 is that you see the aftermath of what both Gwen and Finney are dealing with. Finney is dealing with the aftermath of his kidnapping from the grabber in a completely different way than his sister is. And now his sister is the one being stalked by the grabber. She's having visions, nightmares, dreams about the grabber and about this mystery, and it's really her that sets them off on their adventure. Where I think this movie does falter a little bit is its slow build-up. It definitely has to establish where these characters are after the events of the first film, but it does feel like it takes a while to get to where we actually need to be, to this camp, this very snowy camp, which I actually liked that setting. A snowy camp is always going to be creepy. This is a perfect horror movie to watch in the middle of January when there's a 4-foot snowstorm happening outside and you have nowhere to go and you're stuck inside. Watch it at night. You're going to have that feeling of isolation like they do in this movie. There are, of course, other people around that are helping them, as there would be in a movie like this, but there's not a lot of them. It's not like it's a whole camp full of kids. They are literally left to their own devices to try and take down the grabber, played once again by Ethan Hawke. That was a bit of an element that I thought was a bit disappointing and kind of ties into the slow build of the movie. The grabber doesn't have that much screen time in this movie, and the less Ethan Hawke, the less better your movie's going to be, because Ethan Hawke has really established himself as a Scream King in recent years. He's kind of made his comeback on horror movies, which is something you wouldn't really expect from Ethan Hawke. I mean, I know he made that one with Angelina Jolie, Taking Lives, like way back in the day. That was probably the closest he ever came to making a horror movie. That's what I would say. He hates that movie. That's probably the closest thing you would get to Ethan Hawke being a real psychopathic creepo in a movie like this. Now he's making The Purge, he's in Sinister, he's in these movies, he's just making horror movies left and right. It's good for him. He's like an unsung, underrated Scream King, and I couldn't be more happier for him, but I wanted more of the grabber in this movie. When the grabber is on screen, he is menacing. Ethan Hawke's voice for the grabber just has that sense of murderous intent in that voice. And that's what makes him so creepy as the grabber. I just wish that there was more of it and that he had more screen time. I wish that there was a way they could have incorporated him more into the first half of this movie, because he doesn't really come in until about an hour in. And then when he comes in, you only have less than an hour left to establish him as the force to be reckoned with once again, as you did in the first movie, there just wasn't enough time, I don't think. But the rest of the movie is just really good. I like the supporting characters that they have to work with here. And I like that religion kind of comes back as a theme in this movie. Now, whether or not this movie even has to exist, here's the thing. My friend made a comparison on his Letterboxd review to the two Megan movies, because both the Megan movies and both Black Phone movies are produced by Blumhouse. So Jason Blum is the one that is essentially the one giving them the financing and producing everything. I'm going to compare it to Megan for a minute, because I think you can kind of look at it as like the same situation. Megan, I think, has more of a franchise and sequel potential than the Black Phone. The Black Phone to me is a movie that really just should have stood on its own. It's one of those movies that doesn't need a sequel, but at the same time, I don't think that Blumhouse is the one that commissioned a sequel. I didn't have that feeling watching Black Phone 2. I had that feeling watching Megan 2.0. I felt like that was something commissioned by Jason Blum. He was like, nope, we need a sequel to that, because I don't know which one made more money at the box office. I'd have to look it up. I would assume it would be Megan. So Megan was probably more popular at the time, but I just also don't think Scott Derrickson would allow somebody to take something like the Black Phone out of his hands like that. I think he would be the one who would come to Blumhouse or the studio and say like, "Hey, I have this idea for a sequel to the Black Phone. I don't necessarily want to make a sequel, but I have an idea that I want to make." That's kind of a reason why I don't think he made Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, due to creative differences. What Marvel wanted to do wasn't the movie that he wanted to make, which is why he didn't make it. I don't think Jason Blum or anybody at Blumhouse or even Universal really forced Scott Derrickson's hand. I think it was more that he had an idea and he brought it to them, and he wanted to make the idea work even if it's not as good as the original. And I think that that's the case there. Megan has more sequel potential, but I think the Black Phone feels like it's a more organic, put together sequel compared to it, because I think Scott Derrickson is the one who had the idea for this sequel. What makes this movie so creepy and eerie too is that in a way it's paying homage to A Nightmare on Elm Street by having the grabber be this dead spirit that is now inhabiting dreams, and Gwen's having these dreams and she's trying to figure out what exactly is going on in these dreams. She is sleepwalking in the middle of the night. People are trying to keep her awake, like so that she doesn't fall asleep. There's a lot of elements that are borrowed from A Nightmare on Elm Street, sure, but I would have more of a problem with this if the first one didn't already have supernatural elements in it. I mean, you're talking about a movie that had a kid stuck in a basement communicating with dead spirits over a phone, and they were helping him escape. If that movie didn't have it, and this movie just randomly introduced supernatural elements, I'd probably have a problem with that, and I would probably just say, yeah, it's a blatant ripoff of A Nightmare on Elm Street. But I did feel like that this was an actual progression, not just character wise, but in terms of the horror, like trying to actually scare you and bringing those supernatural elements and putting them at the forefront of something that felt very grounded with the first movie, and now making just a straightforward scary movie and trying to scare the pants off of you. I thought that was actually really smart, and it made this feel unique compared to the first one. It didn't feel like a rehash of the first one. It didn't feel like it was trying so hard to do something different. It felt organic, and I do like that this has more of a focus on Gwen rather than Finney. Finney is, of course, dealing with his own stuff in this, but it's cool that they both kind of get their own movie. You have Finney with the first one, Gwen with this one. They both team up in this one with other people and each other. I just had a lot of fun with Black Phone 2. Is it a sequel that necessarily needed to be made? No. But is it a sequel that like I'm frustrated, angry, or mad that got made? No. Like it's one of those situations where you can just kind of accept the fact that a movie that didn't necessarily need a sequel has a sequel and it wasn't terrible. This isn't like a Gladiator situation where you didn't need a Gladiator 2, because let's face it, I did enjoy Gladiator 2, but Gladiator did not need a sequel. And I think you can even argue that Megan, going back to that comparison, did not need a sequel or either, but It is what it is, you know. I mean, these movies make money. It's not like Scott Derrickson was churning out a Black Phone movie in a year and a half to 2 years. Like then you would know that that was commissioned by Jason Blum. This definitely took some time to make, and I do think that you don't need a third one. I would rather just end it here. As much as I don't like stuff stopping at 2, if you have a great idea, sure. I don't know what else you could really do though. It does feel fresh. It doesn't feel like it is a rehash of the first one. Probably the biggest praise: the eeriness, the creepiness, the snowy landscape, very well shot, and everything with the Super 8 films that have this grainy look to it make it more terrifying than it should be. I really enjoyed Black Phone 2, and I think I really enjoyed it with a full bucket of popcorn. So there you go. I think your enjoyment of this movie is really going to depend on whether or not you think this sequel should have been made, and whether or not you can kind of detach it from its borrowing from A Nightmare on Elm Street, or if it's not. I kind of didn't see it that way. I just saw the inspiration, but it was nothing like blatantly ripping it off. I think those two things are really going to be the contention point with Black Phone 2. But if you have seen Black Phone 2, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere.